Lecture series in Tamora. I'm introducing Mr. Thomas Girst, Global Head of Cultural Engagement at BMW Culture Group. Today he'll be talking to us about companies and culture and why the arts are essential for humankind. Please letting you know that there are translation mics if anyone needs them. I'll hand over the floor to Mr. Thomas.
Thank you so much for having the opportunity to address you in an issue that should be also an issue of relevance here in Egypt, as we're all gathering for Art Egypt here in Cairo. And I'm actually very fortunate. I wanted to thank from the bottom of my heart Nadine Gaffa, to invite us here, to make us great and proud partners of this amazing thing that you have achieved. And I think it became very clear when you welcomed everyone yesterday that this is a true team effort, and you weren't tiring of mentioning all the names of those that really helped to make this amazing thing come true. Because one thing we should know is that art should not be taken for granted. That we see in this house, great art coming from contemporary artists, some of which are working in your team, that we go to El Muez Street and see in this ancient part of, 1,000-year-old part of Cairo, we can see contemporary art bouncing off of each other with the rooms and venues that it's shown into in a symbiosis that I have rarely experienced, is something that is really amazing and a big treat. So a huge thank you to Nadine also for me being able to address this subject matter to you today. And just, I want to look at my cheat sheet because I also want to thank, of course, Hannah El-Bablevi, who made all of this possible, whose art is also here on the floor. Also, of course, Hannah Shenuda's work, you can see here, who's also been of great, sorry, did I say it wrong? Oh, God, yeah. You know everyone. Okay, good. And at least Yaya Kudus from BMW Egypt is also here, as well as I see Michael Kindermann, and I see Christian also here, Christian Bajo. So thank you so much again. I'm going to jump right into this. We're calling this reimagined narratives, and I read an interview with Nadine who said that it's very essential that the public sector and the politicians are working together. I understand that in Egypt there should be more curators, to buy art, to support art. There should be more foundations, to open their doors, as many foundations have done, to welcome artists into their factories, into what they're doing. So the effort is on its way, but a lot more can be done. And I really want to make the case that even for a premium car manufacturer like the BMW Group, it is essential to be part of the arts. There's no law on the planet. I'm sure there's no law in Egypt that tells companies, whatever 2% of your profits, you have to give to the arts. But it would be a good thing also for the image and for the reputation of the company. So let me delve right into what I wanted to say. The BMW Group itself has been active in the arts for 50 years now, with hundreds of engagements worldwide. But what does it actually mean when we are getting engaged in culture? And where do companies and culture really come together? And I want to start, probably see here, and I'm going to get into this in a second. You see here, this is the BMW art car that was painted by Andy Warhol, the great pop artist from the United States. I'm going to talk about him in a bit, but before that, there's a quote from Andy Warhol that actually says, "Good business is the best art." It's sometimes unusual to hear that from an artist, that they so much are getting into the business side of things, but we also should pay attention to the fact that the international art market, the art market is a $60 billion business every year. I don't know what part Egypt plays in this, or the broader region, but it is 60 billion, and everybody wants a piece of the cake, be it galleries, be it artists, be it art fairs. It's a huge business case behind this. So while this might sound a little bit obscene, coming from Andy Warhol, it's a good quote nevertheless. But I want to steer a little bit away from the business side of things. Good business is the best art, at least according to Andy Warhol. And then you have Milton Friedman, a great economist from the past century from the United States, who just said, the business of business is business. Why should any business do anything that has to do with corporate social responsibility if it is about only the profit margins, if it's about the balance sheets? And I will get into why that is important. Because I want to tell you something. And I'm sure you have noticed that ugliness is spreading. Ugliness at the moment is spreading all over the world, you know, whether we like it or not. You know, there is xenophobia, there's nationalism, there's, bad things happening to human rights all over the place. So ugliness seems to be spreading across the planet. And we are all here for something that we would define as beauty. But you see, beauty is something to protect. Beauty is something that can exist within the arts. And I do believe that, you know, the arts and also what companies can do can have to do with beauty if we don't only end up on the bling bling side of things, on the business side of things, but also on the side where meaning is being created, where art can truly speak to you. And I'm sure that you've made that experience while walking around Art Egypt, that art opened up to you and you opened up to the art. And I love this quote here because that quote pretty much makes it clear. It's by Marshall McLuhan from the 1960s, you know, when the United States started going to the moon and everything. And we started looking at planet Earth as not just a planet, but also as a spaceship. And if we think of planet Earth as a spaceship, and we think of us not as passengers, but as crew members, you know, we become a lot more responsible when it comes to, you know, dealing with the art, with the environment and other things. So there are no passengers on Spaceship Earth. We're all crew, and we are all crew together. You know, we as human beings are in this together because now we have really entered, you know, the age of the Anthropocene, where it is humans that are altering the planet for the better or for the worse. That's in our hands, and that is currently being debated. So culture does play a small part in all of this. And I really want to tell you a little story. I know that the Institut Français is involved in Art Egypt. They've been a great partner. So I want to tell you just a little story about this man who happens to be a Frenchman. It doesn't matter if you don't know who he is, but he lived in the late 19th century. His name was Ferdinand Cheval. Yeah? So you might have guessed, it says Post, I know. So you know he's worked. He was a mailman. And he was a mailman in the late 19th century, and he was delivering the mail in a little town called Audrive. And he was walking, I think, 20 kilometers every day to deliver the mail in Audrive and the little valleys surrounding Audrive. He was walking through cornfields, he was walking through valleys, he was walking through meadows. And at the age of 43, and I realize most of you in this room are not even 43 yet, good for you, by the way. So you have time. You have time on your hands. But at the age of 43, this postman came across, a stone. Like he was carrying the mail and he was walking, and boom! All of a sudden, you know, he finds this stone. He lifts it. It actually then turns out to be a bigger stone, and he takes it out of the earth, and it's this big, and he takes it with him, and he puts it on his vegetable garden at the river Galore that runs through Audrive. So he takes it with him to the vegetable garden, and then every day when he delivers the mail, and remember, 20 kilometers every day besides Sunday, he picks up all the pebbles, all the little stones, all the shells. He builds a little wheelbarrow to be able to carry more, and he takes it with him to his garden, to his vegetable garden. And you know that 40 years later, what this man has built is this. Come on, we're in Egypt. We know what people can do in 18 months with lots of stones. I mean, this should not be coming as a surprise, not to those that are proud enough to be Egyptians here in this room. No, but isn't that amazing? I mean, I know we learned yesterday that it took 2 million people to build the pyramids, but the thing is, or the first one at least, but, or 100,000, whatever. It's like, we're exaggerating here. But this is really, it's a true story. So this guy builds this, and it's still standing in his vegetable garden. Now it's a museum. 200,000 people come every year to see this. This guy wasn't even an architect. But you know why he could build all these like Hindu temples and mosques and Catholic churches? You have all of this in there because when he was delivering the mail, photography was invented, right? And on the postcards, in the magazines, he sees these from faraway places, and he takes all of this in, and then he creates this. So what I'm saying is that, of course, now you can go there and you can buy, you can buy T-shirts. This is called the Palais Ideal of the postman Fernand Cheval. So you can buy T-shirts, you can buy keychains, you can buy cases for your iPhone, that have the Palais Ideal on it. Or when you are there, you can actually go on the fields and on the meadows, and then you can just pick up a stone. You know, like I did. Okay, I picked it up here, but it's like for the story, it's like I picked it up. It's an Egyptian stone. But what I'm saying is you can actually go and walk where he was walking and pick up a stone. I'm saying this because I put that stone on my desk and look at it, and I think, just imagine what one single person can do with that stone. Like, and then, you know, you think, my God, I can do a lot myself as well. And that's what I truly believe the arts are for. You know, the arts are for this, you know, science is for that, math is for that, the health sciences are for that, but arts also play a part in this. This is what humans are capable of if they focus on the beauty and not so much, you know, on the ugliness that we do onto each other. So now how do we get from here to the companies? There's another image right here. So what does that have? If we look at BMW, you probably know the logo. This was not a piece of commissioned art, but it was done by Boris Buchan in the 1970s, early 1970s. And I always show that at internal presentations. I said, look, BMW also has to do with the arts. Look at you know, how we inspire artists. Yeah, they don't buy that within the company. You know, it's like I still have to fight for my budget. But nevertheless, I give you an example of how things are done wrong when companies are giving money or when they are doing things in the arts. Because you can do a lot of things wrong, and you should be doing things right. What I'm saying, that I'm making the case that if you're doing things right, cultural engagement, being able to partner with great artistic institutions around the world, you can do a lot of great things. Not so much out of philanthropy or altruism, but because it's also good for the image and the reputation of the company. And here's an example of how things shouldn't work. This was actually an exhibition in Germany, I don't know, 6 years ago. As most of your artists or work within the arts, you have long recognized that I showed here another Frenchman, Henri Matisse, with a great painting, I think, from the 1930s. And here's a shampoo bottle I keep anonymous for a good reason. Because there was an exhibition of Henri Matisse, and it was sponsored by a shampoo manufacturer. Yeah? Why would a shampoo manufacturer do that? Of course, you know, so they get more exposure, more visibility. But you know what they wrote in the press release? They said like that they are sponsoring this show by Henri Matisse because if you look at the way, and I tried to find the right image, that Matisse wielded his pencils, like or his brushes when he was painting, it's pretty much the same movement, you know, when you are under the shower and you shampoo your hair. So can you believe this? And I think, you know, who's also spinning like this in his grave? It's probably Henri Matisse, yeah? So what I'm saying here is you have three losers right away. You know, the poor artists, the company that is being torn apart when anybody really in their right mind reads their press release, and the cultural institution. Come on, you know, we can do better than that, and we can do really meaningful things. And it's about knowing your company and then knowing what it is that you want to do. Do something meaningful and not this sort of thing. So, and just to throw the third Frenchman into there after Fernand Cheval and Henri Matisse, because the one thing that art can also do, and we see that now when we look at Henri Matisse, an artist long dead, or we look at the great Fernand Cheval, Palais Idéal, it's that Charles Baudelaire, the great French 19th century poet, he also said that only humans, we can communicate throughout the centuries and the decades and through the millennia. You know, I'm in Egypt, I'm in a 6,000-year-old culture. You know, you can communicate, and we see artists communicate with ancient Egyptian culture, but still looking ahead into the future as contemporary artists. But Charles Baudelaire said that we can communicate with other human beings from decades, centuries, millennia ago, through art, through music, through literature, and he says, like lighthouses giving off signals along the nightly shore. You know, like lighthouses giving off signals along the nightly shore. That's such a beautiful poetic image, and I think that is what the arts are for. You know, and that is what companies can do, and that is what companies also can benefit from. If they don't do it as stupid, I'm sorry, as this. So off we go. But the thing is this, you learn from bad examples a lot better than from good examples. So it's not me showing off what we do, but it's showing off what others do wrong, which puts us in a good place, of course, as well. So, So just to give you an idea, of course, BMW is a premium manufacturer, BMW Group, with BMW, Mini, and Rolls-Royce as our brands. it's essential to us that we are engaged in the arts. There's 130,000 people working for BMW worldwide. And as I said before, we do many projects for many, many decades around the world. And you have to have a strategy in place. What are your values as a company? If you are a person as a company, and that's where good corporate citizenship sets in, how would you behave? What do you return to a society that you do successful business in? Again, no law on the planet tells you what to do or what not to do. But it is a good thing to be doing something for the society that you do successful business in. So a strategy somewhat needs to be in place, and we're lucky to have that sort of strategy. And these are basically our key messages in terms of why we do get engaged in the arts. Some of them I've already spoken about. The good corporate citizenship part. Because no matter where you work, and I know some of you also do graphic design or are in advertisement or whatnot, and we always speak of branding. I happen to think that Art Egypt has a fantastic branding, with that very good logo, and the films and the clips that you're doing are all, up to speed. But the best definition that I've ever heard of a brand is from some 60, I don't know if you saw the series Mad Men, anyone? Yes, okay, good. Me too, I was like addicted to this thing. So the thing is, yeah. Okay, so let's not get into Mad Men, but it was somebody from the 60s in an ad agency somewhere in Manhattan who came up with the definition of a brand that a brand is a piece of real estate in somebody else's mind. A brand is a piece of real estate in somebody else's mind. So what is that piece of real estate if we are BMW? Is it just a garage, or a nicely designed car? It might also be an opera house. It might also be a museum. So this is, it's a piece of real estate, so curate it. Create something nice, create something meaningful with it. And we happen to think of BMW as a cultured brand, so that is the way we go. And also I say intercultural dialogue, you can bitch about globalism, as many do, and rightly so. Be critical. But globalism is great because I'm on the phone, I tell you that much, in the morning with my colleagues in China, in Asia, at night with those in South America, speaking with Russia and England and Italy in between. It's like globalism, I have an American boss, you know what I mean? It's like, it's an international company. And intercultural dialogue, without that, you would not be an international company. So it is the basis of a successful worldwide business enterprise. And I do think, and I cannot stress it often enough, is the curatorial integrity and the creative freedom, that artists need. In order to be creative, you have to have absolute freedom in terms of what it is and what you can do and what you should do. Because BMW can only be a great company as our designers and our engineers are free to create. They're striving to create the best cars on the planet, be it with electricity, be it with whatever they're running on right now. But the thing is, if they didn't have that freedom, they would not be able to create that amazing work. So as a company, if you're getting involved as a company in the arts, you should not tell an artist what to do or what not to do. You should really, trust the artist, trust the cultural institution, trust the museum, the opera house, the galleries, etc., that they're doing whatever it is that they're doing without any interference. And if you need a connection between the company and the arts, I know that pre-Socratic times to you are like young because Egypt is so much older, but pre-Socratic times sound old in Germany. But in pre-Socratic times you had one word for achievements in the arts and for achievements in technology, and that word was techne. We come from the same root if we celebrate innovation, if we celebrate creativity. So that is what I meant to say here. Be there for the long haul. Give partners the security that you're with them for some time, so they can plan ahead. And the one thing is, the sponsorship is always like a monetary transfer from A to B. It's a mere transaction. If you call yourself a sponsor, I never call ourselves a sponsor because I think of partnerships. Most of you in this room had partnerships or are in partnerships, and yes, sometimes you bitch. Sometimes you fight, but then sometimes you also try to rearrange whatever it is that you have together. So it doesn't mean that partnerships are not rocky or that you don't speak about what it is that you want and what it is that the partner want, but you can come up with something great together. And that is what I mean when I say we are partners, because it's not only a monetary transaction, but it is an interaction. You know, we bring some knowledge and some network to the table by having been partners in the arts for 50 years now, and our partners can delve into that, or they don't. You know, we don't force them to, but I do think that that is important in the way that we are setting ourselves up. And the subtlety of brand positioning, okay, of course we have our logo here pretty much everywhere, but the thing is this, it's like, if you were to emblazon, you know, the BMW logo onto the red curtain before the opera starts, you would put off the same people that you are trying to reach. You know, they would be like, oh, what is this logo doing there? And again, the arts are so important. And I said before, ugliness is spreading. Nothing should interfere with the viewer's take. You know, when you look at an artwork, it's you and the onlooker. If you listen to something, it's you and it's the classical music or anything that you're listening to. Nothing should interfere with that experience. So if you are more sophisticated, you should also position your logo in a subtle sort of way. Of course, we want to be recognized as partners of the arts, but it doesn't have to do with the bigness of your logo. Having said that, let me move on. We can skip this one, but it's corporate citizenship. Marketing people are also involved, and they need to sell cars. So it is about shaping the brand profile as well. It is about what we call intellectual leadership, visionary engagements, and contemporary luxury. That doesn't mean that we don't do things for young artists as well, but it means that, you know, we have a certain standard in terms of what it is that we do. And you know what? When media writes about what it is that we do, sometimes this is the most important word. Authentic, yeah? Because as you know, when you're working in marketing, every word has basically almost been taken. You know, even big companies are running campaigns with the word love, as if love is something that can solely be bought. But authenticity is a tricky word, because the moment that you say, I'm authentic, you're not, right? Because why would you claim you're authentic if you're authentic, so you're not? So authentic, is it an adverb? I was never good in grammar. It's an adverb, right? Is it? Thank you, thank you. So authentic is an adjective. Come on, it's an adjective. It's an adjective that you cannot claim for yourself, but that others can, when they talk about you, they can say. So this is something that you cannot really buy, and I'm actually happy when that sort of thing happens. So what I'm saying is to everybody, you know, to the big companies in Egypt in this regard, you know, if you want to do something right, then get into the arts. And do that alongside of what it is that you're doing in the first place, and it might come across as something authentic and help shape your brand profile in the process. That chart is very dear to me, and I'm pretty much coming to the end. And before I give you one more example of what it is that we do, the creative class. Richard Florida in the 1970s, an amazing sociologist from the United States, he said that the creative class, in a post-industrial society, the creative class is an economic driving force. And we shouldn't underestimate the power of the creative class. Of course, if you're artists in Germany, you're not making that much money if you don't look at the big artists that are selling a lot at auctions and galleries. So artists are struggling, artists are striving, artists are sometimes, you know, it's hard for them to put even food on the table. But at the same time, in post-industrial society, we shouldn't underestimate the power, also the business and the economic power of the creative class combined. So it's an economic driving force, and I think that is what needs to be realized, really. That in Germany, it's between the chemical and the automotive industry. You have the creative class, I think, contributing 2.2% to the gross-national product. So that is how important the creative class is as a whole. And there's an attention competition out there. Every artist who shows out there knows that there's an attention competition already lurking in the next room when another artist is showing. You know, who gets to be represented by a gallery? Who gets a museum show? It just continues, that rat race, as some call it. And you have to also, when you think about what it is that you do, and here again I think we are in great hands with Art Egypt, it's about what is your USP? What is your unique selling point? And I think Art Egypt has found a perfect niche in this regard, you know, to position contemporary art within the context of the great history of this country. And you know, and as an artist and also as a company, there's so many things that you can do nowadays, working with AR, with virtual reality, augmented reality, Instagram, WhatsApp, Facebook Lives, WeChat, Weibo, Periscope, QR, TikTok, or whatever that new thing is called. What I'm saying is that you as an artist, you as an institution, us as a company can work directly through those channels and create the visibility and the reputation that you want to create, both as a company and ideally as an artist, to get the exposure that you're striving to get by wanting to be seen, and then by placing your art ideally in the hands of collectors. But again, I wanted to say something about the return of the real, which is basically, explaining what I mean by authentic as well. And here I want to give you now, in closing, a good example of what we think that we are doing that is also contributing to the arts, and that is bringing me back to Andy Warhol. You probably know this guy. In 1979, he painted the fourth BMW art car within 28 minutes, turning it into the most expensive car on planet Earth, as some media writes. It's an M1 from 1979. Andy Warhol paints it, and he's part of a bigger series of art cars, by Robert Rauschenberg, by Alexander Calder, by John Baldessari, Chow Fei, and others who've all painted Jeff Koons, who have created BMW art cars. But again, we're not only looking at the heritage, we're also looking into the future. We're looking into the digitalization, working with a young artist, Chinese artist in the 21st century, who actually employs AR, VR, and artificial intelligence and creates an app about the car. It's no longer just about painting, but it is about employing new technology, something that we, of course, as a tech company, are also happy to provide. So you have to endure one little clip with me about the BMW art cars, which explains actually things a lot better than I could possibly do. There should be sound.
Warhol, Lichtenstein, Rauschenberg, Calder, Estella, these contemporary artists in this series.
One of my favorites was Andy Warhol's painting because he messed up a racing car, and strangely enough, it's one of the best things he ever did.
I thought it would be nice if women could participate in some fashion other than standing around in bikinis.
Actually, I would like to do about 10 more, all different.
Le rêve, c'est que BMW continue à les montrer dans le monde entier. Je ne pouvais pas trouver mieux.
The car should be not only raising and the physical way, but also I think the car should be raising in the heart.
I can't help what people, what they call my art. I mean, I don't call it pop art. I don't call it conceptual art. I just say, this is an artist and this is what I do.
We're not going to talk about this here, who's the next BMW art car artist, but nevertheless, there's one thing that I want to show you with Jeff Koons. When you do these things that actually matter, and ever since the invention of the automobile, which BMW certainly didn't invent, there are artists that are drawn to the question of mobility, to racing, to the sound of the car, to this synesthetic experience that a car can be. And when we had the world premiere at the Centre Pompidou with Jeff Koons in 2010, and then showed the car all over the world, like here in Norway, with our colleagues there, a year later, you had all these competitors and other brands that were also, using the design by Jeff Koons. I mean, you probably know that if you have had a great idea and it gets a lot of exposure, it gets copied. But what do? You shouldn't, sue or not sue. But it's actually a 19th century heretic priest from from England who is supposed to have said that copy is the greatest compliment. And maybe he even stole that quote, who knows. But what I'm saying is you have to let this go, and this tells you that this, is a rather successful thing to be doing. So this is all for the moment. I mean, I could ramble on, as you may very well imagine, but I will stop myself right here. And I say thank you. This is what we do in Berlin, for example. This is what we do in London. You know, it's not only about premium and getting, you know, the high rollers, but it's also what I said about CSR. You know, if you have 20,000 people standing on Trafalgar Square listening to a free concert by the London Symphony Orchestra directed by Sir Simon Rattle, that is something that we also like to make possible every year for the past 5 years now. And again, very sorry for messing up Nur Hassan and Malak Shenuda's names at the very beginning when I wanted to thank those that deserve the most thanks. So you also deserve thanks for having listened to me. There can be Q&As. Don't make it difficult for me, please, with critical questions. But I would take those questions if you have them. But at the very end, I would really, really like to say again, you know, how essential it is, you know, to create and to do as much as possible to have an environment, to have an infrastructure that has artists striving and that has art strive, because art is what will remain of us. We see that and we know it, and everything will have fallen apart, but art will still be standing strong. And if we wouldn't have collectors, if we wouldn't have foundations, if we wouldn't have, you know, museums that are actually nurturing the arts and this sort of breeding ground of ideas and creativity, we would be, you know, overwhelmed by the ugliness. So let's protect beauty. Let's do more for that. And I cannot, you know, support Nadine more in saying that there should be so much more for the benefit of the companies, you know, public, political, private-public partnerships. I know it's a long battle, it's a long struggle, but it's definitely worth it for both sides. And I never say win-win situation because it's such a lame word, but in this case, it can actually work, and I'm certain that it will, also here in Egypt. Thank you very much. Oh, if there's a question, please feel free to ask. Yes.
Yeah, second mic. Are we going to do this with another mic? Hi. That was a very interesting talk, very energetic. My name is Alexandra Stock. I'm a curator here based in Cairo. And I have a question for you that concerns why artists or cultural institutions should be interested in corporate partnerships beyond the financial benefits. Because, I mean, you're obviously speaking from one perspective, and I'm coming from the other. And I find that there's often a huge power imbalance. And you have mentioned, for example, that, you know, partnering with artists is good for the reputation of the company. And you also mentioned Richard Florida, who I personally think is a very problematic figure, predatory actually. But I was actually wondering if you could maybe just hypothetically think of like what the partnership is beyond this financial relationship.
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. I obviously don't create the opposites in terms of that, you know, there's curators and there's the museum and there's a corporate partner. I would be very much for the idea of the dialogue. I know there's a power imbalance because the cultural institution wants money and the company has the money. So what does the contractual agreement look like? But nevertheless, I do believe, and I would think from my experience working as a cultural manager, that at least in many parts of the world, companies are no longer exuding their willpower as much as they did, because they understand that if they leave the arts as they are, it's also better for their image. When I say they can benefit from it, I don't mean that you know, artists have to sing the song of the company. I mean that companies are no longer only valued by the value of their shares, but they're also being looked at as corporate citizens. What do they return to the society that they do successful business in? And I think it goes a long way when companies can say, look, we support this museum, we support this initiative, without ever telling artists what to do or whether they have to paint cars or something else. I wouldn't want to say that there's not an imbalance of power, but if you were to use that imbalance of power to exude your will, then I think that would be wrong. Yeah. So I truly believe that at the beginning of a partnership, the institution, let's say a museum, and the company should sit at a table and be very open and transparent about what the other wants from the person across the table. When you speak to a museum and they say, look, we can do anything, but we don't want any cars in the museum, then that is, of course, we wouldn't want to put cars there, but they sometimes have to make that statement, or any other things. And then you can see, you start that dance, and then you see whether you dance well together. So I think that on both sides, at least in the past 10 years, I think people have become more professional in this regard. Yeah. Thank you for your question. And one thing, I mean, we have seen on a global scale that many companies have been recently under attack. I don't want to mention them here, but for having been partners of the arts, which their businesses are such that they probably don't come across as great moral institutions. So actually, money has been returned to some of these companies, or some of these companies. Or some of the institutions have said that they will no longer allow money from these companies. It was interesting to me to see that this protest actually was started by artists rather than the institutions themselves. Yep.
Sorry. Thank you very much for a very interesting talk and for encouraging corporations to support the arts. In your presentation, you focused.
We can try it out. What do you think?
In your presentation, you focused mainly on the cars, the artists and the cars. So one gets the impression that BMW wants the artists to paint the BMW cars. What other artistic ventures does BMW support?
First of all, thank you, for the question. I saw your work yesterday in the psychiatric ward of Lewis Street, and I was really taken aback, particularly by your work, particularly. So thank you for being here and joining the talk. This was probably not the best example when the BMW art cars are very close to the brand itself. It's artists that are painting cars. And when I wasn't working at BMW, I actually thought that this was an obscene way of how BMW introduces itself to the arts. By paying a painter who would, we would throw money at an artist, artists would throw paint at a car, and then a design object would turn into an art object. So that is. Of course, now I'm responsible for the series, and I know that, that's actually the point that I wanted to make, is that the BMW art cars they didn't come into being because PR or marketing people put their heads together and were thinking, how can we introduce the BMW brand to the arts? But it came out of the passion of a race driver and our BMW Motorsports director for both the arts and racing. So they were doing this together basically against all odds in the mid-1970s when these cars were actually racing at the greatest endurance race on the planet in Le Mans. So I brought up this example to say that these things, in terms of return of the real, have a trajectory that leads right back into the passion of those that make this happen, and not some marketing or PR idea. To give you many, many examples, as I said, it's hundreds of things. We do so many things for young artists. Like there's something called the BMW Art Journey where artists can go and travel. Because artists, they sometimes don't have the means, they don't have the time, they don't have the possibility to travel. And again, it's not about throwing money at an artist, but it's about making them devise a travel on their own, so they can go and do research or create works, in terms of a mobile studio when they leave theirs behind. We are partnering with many prizes for contemporary artists, just so that the cultural institutions has the means of supporting these artists. And I make sure that we don't sit in the jury, that we don't have a single vote by those that actually choose be it an art car artist or be it the artists that go on the BMW art journey or those that are involved with the Prize of the National Gallery, for example. In 2 weeks, I'm in Paris where we have residency programs, many residency programs around the world for young artists, in this case, photographers that are then showcasing their work in Arles, where we are also partnering, and at Paris Photo, where we're also partners. So they don't only get the BMW residency if they are in France and if they are photographers, but they also get to show at venues that we partner with. Also to answer the question, what do the artists have from this sort of partnership? They can delve into our network, and we can thus give them more exposure. Yeah. Thank you. There's 2 more questions, but then you guys are probably want food and drinks. Yeah. Sorry.
Yes, it's more of a comment than a question. In your defense, working with BMW and artists, it makes perfect sense. And it is relevant, for instance, to us. We produce furniture in woodwork, and we're experts in traditional woodwork. So it makes perfect sense for us when we ally ourselves with artists is to work on wood with them. We will not work with plastic or plexi or any other material. So I feel this is logical. But the other thing also I want to say, maybe it is also more of a comment, big companies in Egypt, I think, have an extra challenge, because when they want to invest in art, they usually get some big shot name of an artist from Europe or America. Maybe if we do some self-reflection and we try to ally ourselves with indigenous artists who are really talented, it needs some background information, but I think this is the only way that Egyptian art can get a lift. It needs a bit of a risk, because if I'm a company, I want to put my money where I'll get my money back. I need to invest in someone who is well-known or a style that is very popular. But I think the momentum has to start. I don't always have to get a big name from Europe or otherwise. Thank you.
I think also it's a question of, thank you very much for your comment, and it makes complete sense that you would be doing what it is that you're doing based on the foundation and the business that the foundation is running. I think also it's a question of scalability. I mean, now I talk about BMW, it's a huge international company. As I said, 130,000 people working for that company with 30 plants all over the world. Scalability is, you have small businesses, you have middle-sized businesses, you have big businesses, and all of them can get involved in the arts for many reasons. You know, be it like a local regional partner by supporting, like Philips did, I think. I mean, they're not a local regional partner, but Philips did, you know, they do exactly what they do right, and that is lighting. So I heard that some deal was struck with Philips being a great partner actually in making this possible, in supplying, you know, in value in kind sort of thing to make something here. So it would actually be for every owner of every company, for every strategy within a company, to think, how can we align these values? Because at the bottom of everything are certain values, is a certain strategy. And you cannot just, you know, grab a big artist out of a hat and then, you know, get as much visibility as you can. It is about the long haul. It is not about jumping from event to event, but being there and making a difference and being in there in a sustainable, long-term way. I would think that is the only way. Thank you.
Hi, I just have a question based on the answer that you gave earlier. I want to know, where can we see the artwork that you're talking about, that you support the young artists? Is there any place on your website? I think that's a very nice initiative, and I'd love to be able to see the types of works that comes out of this support.
Thank you very much for asking. Yes, of course, that's a BMW Group Culture. We have our Facebook, Instagram channels. I should actually put it up where you can follow what it is that we do. Like, I know now we're off to Paris. We're doing Paris Photo. We'll show this young photographer who's actually dealing with very harsh images of war. That doesn't necessarily
the ugly that you talked about.
Is it, right? Yeah. Exactly. The ugliness that I speak about, but in a metaphorical way. And who are we to censor, right? That doesn't necessarily feed into the brand of what BMW wants to stand for. And my colleagues from France actually called me and said, Thomas, these are images of wars. But I said, look, if we say we leave the art, free, then this is what we need also to prove and to show that, you know, we are not part of this. And this artist, by taking harsh images from war, is using a metaphor to show us how senseless all of this is. So I think we should be more bold. And you can, again, follow us on all the channels and also on our website and see what it is that we do. We'll have at Art Basel in Miami Beach, we'll have, you know, a presentation of Zach Langdon Pole, who's a young artist from New Zealand who has traveled actually the seas to try to prove that in Polynesian times, people without a compass, people without a sextant, were able to navigate across the seas and populate islands far away. It's mind-numbing what all these artists are getting into and what you can actually get out of it if you really give it some time and delve into their train of thought.
Very quick on this.
Yeah, is that a wrap-up basically, or are there more questions? Okay, great. Then, please.
Because you said you yourself were not on the jury when you selected the artist, but could you perhaps briefly speak about what some of the selection criteria are that you're aware of when it comes to partnering with artists?
Maybe, I apologize, you're getting the mic.
Oh, we are using the mic, okay. Now, you mentioned that you yourself were perhaps not on the jury when it came to selecting artists, but what are some of the selection criteria that you are aware of when it comes to partnering with artists and institutions?
There's none. There aren't. Let's say when the Berlin Biennial or the Kochi Museums Biennial, if we don't speak about the art fairs that we are also partnering with, there's a young curators workshop with the Berlin Biennial. There's a documentaries, films that we partner with at the Kochi Museums Biennial. I don't even know what their criteria are.
But not everybody who asks you for money gets money, or not everybody gets that partnership.
Of course. No. I get 2,000. You know, the more you do in the arts, the more inquiries, of course, you get, because the more visible you are in the arts. I get 2,000 inquiries every year on my desk. You know, from all over the world. Can we do this? Can we do that? So the strategies that we have in place is that it needs to be modern or contemporary art. It needs to be design or architecture, and classical music and jazz. Those are the three pillars. Those are big pillars, if you think about it, in which Rolls-Royce, Mini, and BMW operate in. And then it is about not supporting artists directly, but through, let's say, biennials or museums, except for the BMW Art Car Series or fairs. So I can always say, look, there's another jury. We don't get to decide who we work with. So individual artists applying would not get our support unless they are, artists from academies that we otherwise, probably give money to. And sometimes it takes 2 or 3 years having discussions with cultural institutions to see what it is that we can come up with jointly, so that any company can basically, give money for an exhibition. I don't say there's anything wrong with it, but maybe you do something like the BMW Guggenheim Lab, where you have people come together from all over the world to discuss, the challenges of the future together, without us curating the program. I think sometimes if you take your time, you can come up with greater things than even what the museum had in mind in the first place when they contacted a company like us. Thank you. Thank you.